Hello, everybody, and welcome to this video from Biggerplate.com. My name is Liam. I'm the founder of Biggerplate.com, and I'm delighted to have with me on the call today on your screen, joining me all the way, I think, from Melbourne in Australia, is Kate Chinarova, also known as Story Kate. I'm going to let Kate introduce herself properly in a second because she'll do a much better job of explaining who she is and what she does. But to give you a brief introduction, I encountered some of Kate's work online in the area of early childhood teaching and education, where she's been using mind mapping in some really interesting, innovative ways. So I fired you a message, I think, Kate, towards the end of last year probably, and said, hey, I want to know more about what you're doing. And we spoke probably about 6 months ago, and I was just blown away by all the interesting things you know about your field. And it's, as you say, it's a real niche area, a very specialist area, but I thought it was just fascinating. And I know lots of our members will find what you're doing generally very interesting, and then also particularly interesting what you're doing with mind mapping. So yeah, Kate, thank you very much for agreeing to come on a little chat with me. Maybe just to give us a better intro than I give you, could you just tell us what is it you do and are doing on a day-to-day basis in your working before we get to mind mapping?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Liam. So my name is Kate, or Katya. So I'm originally from Russia, from Moscow, but I was born in the north of my country, so not far from Norway and Finland. So a bit of Scandinavian as well. So I moved to Australia in 2007, but before I used to be a philosopher, journalist, a political scientist, and who knows what. And when I moved, I changed my tracks and changed the career to become an early childhood educator to start with. And I was able to transfer a lot of knowledge to become an early childhood teacher, got my degree, then master's degree, and eventually became teacher's educator. So at the moment, I'm working at university, online university. I'm teaching bachelor students who aspire to become early childhood teachers. And I also teach Certificate 3 students, which is just a vocational education in Australia, so the basic level. And I still work with children as a relief teacher or educator when I have time between all these occupations. Yeah, so, and I do enjoy talking to them and pretty much watching them thinking, because when children think, they kind of say it out loud, and it's very visible process. So inspired by the theory of Vygotsky, I do like to record their ideas, and that's how mind maps came up as well. So I started to recording the ideas as transcriptions, and they took a lot of time, and I thought, is there any other way? And then I remembered that I know mind mapping.
Right. So
Yeah.
so we go straight back then into the past then. So
Yeah.
you say you were suddenly reminded that you knew about mind mapping.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people we speak to, they sort of learned it or used it in some context and then
Yeah.
almost kind of forget about it or just move on and forget that could be used. So go back in time then. So when did you first learn about mind mapping? So you remembered it, you knew about it later, but when did you originally sort of encounter it and use it previously? Was it in your work as a journalist, or was it something before that?
Yeah, I was fascinated by any kind of learning. Actually, was quite interested in mind mapping. What was it? The Bono as well. Hats of thinking.
The six thinking hats.
Cash flow and all sorts of concepts. But because mind mapping was very, like I would say, accessible. Yeah, I found that it was helping me as a journalist to brainstorm the ideas. So I had to come up with an editorial once a week, and I did not want to write about. So I would just sit down and brainstorm. I was writing about quirky businesses that are very small startups, and I just couldn't come up with ideas. So I started to look around and think what else people can do that could be searchable. So back then we still had Google. It just started pretty much. So, and I used mind maps to brainstorm some businesses that could be a mixture of two things. And then it was true, they would exist. And then I go and talk to them and also organize my questions as a mind map. But eventually I've read a book of Tony Buzan. And when I had my own child, we started to do mind mapping because as a boy, he needed some help with organizing. Yes, so he wasn't very organized, and
I can relate to that. Yeah.
I was also not very organized by nature, because I think I'm not sure, I might have attention deficit, and it was really challenging for me to structure the routines in a way that everything would work. So I wanted to learn more about how children think as well, and to apply it to real life. So I thought that if Tony Buzan thinks that it's the best for children, I should try. So we tried it with him for routines, for hobbies, when he didn't know what to do. So, and I still have those mind maps somewhere in the shed. So, and that's when we used his books, very similar to this one. I couldn't find the original one, but it was mind maps for children. So, and I love this book because it was actually even more interesting than the other one that I've read, because it was so 3D and it had really good examples for children. Once I started working as an early childhood teacher, I thought, oh, that's what I can do with children as well. But the true potential was when achieved when I started to brainstorm myself. So, and invited children to brainstorm as well. So what we think as adults is different to what children think. You know how Tony Buzan says that it should be concise, yes, so, and one word per mind map. So I found it's very difficult to do that. So I could only write few words, while children, they say one word. And I'll give you an example if I'll find this illustration. I think it's in one of my videos as well. It's like, what's on pizza? And when I asked them what's on pizza, they said, I don't know, like ham or sauce. And it's really simplified way of thinking if you think about it, but it does capture what's on pizza. And sometimes they might say cheese. I don't know if I can share the screen.
There's probably a little button down somewhere in the middle with a little upwards arrow that should enable you to share your screen if you'd like to try.
So maybe select tab, not a window. This one. Try to. No, it doesn't. But I might send it to you later on. So
yeah, we can add something afterwards to show people. Yeah.
Basically, it's a picture of pizza, and they said, what's on pizza? So I also changed the way I was doing brainstorming with children, because they are visual learners. So I had to cut out a picture of pizza so they see what we are talking about, because otherwise they're not abstract thinkers at this age. So I had 3 to 4, 4 to 5 years old children. So they need to see the picture of something that they can recognize. Yes, so and pizza is something that they did. So, and we talked about healthy and unhealthy food. We talked about what food is made of, and all other topics. But that was really a great one to start with mind maps. And they said that there is salami and ham on pizza, chicken, tomato sauce, BBQ sauce, and other things. And they didn't really know a lot about other things that are involved in the process of making pizza. And we did use mind map to unpack this process, such as dough, as Play-Doh, that you know what is Play-Doh, etc., etc. So we would use all these steps to make our own pizzas. So we discovered that it's not just for gaining knowledge, like I would say gathering information from children, but also makes their thinking process visible. And I think that's what really is amazing about mind maps and early childhood education.
And so for those of us who are not so familiar with your sort of field, Kate, if you're talking about the kind of age group of children that you're building the pizza mind map with, or if you're talking about early childhood in general, what sort of age of children are we talking about? And then what sort of level are they at in terms of capabilities? Again, I don't have children, so I don't know very much about these things generally. But you know, so if you're talking, you said earlier, you know, there may be they're not abstract thinkers. So what sort of are the limitations, if you like, in terms of where a child has developed cognitively, and where do you think sort of visual tools like mind mapping sort of help to sort of enable some of those in terms of the stage they're at? What age groups are we talking about?
That's actually an amazing question because it makes me think about how we can promote mind maps a little bit further. So we are talking about the age group from 0 to 5. That's a typical age bracket. So babies, toddlers, and preschoolers, but we also sometimes include 0 to 8. So in Australia, it's 0 to 8. Because some children go to after school care and they still are covered under the same framework. But pretty much children who like to play and they are sensory learners, they only start to think in concrete terms. For example, if you tell them, I'll give you an example of preschool thinking. So a child, let's say, asks you for money and you go to the ATM to get money from this from the ATM, and then the next thing child is telling you when you need money that you need to go and ask for it from the ATM machine. So they think that this is where money come from. They don't know how they come from, but they are very concrete thinkers. Or if they see a car, younger children would think that this is the car, right? But to show them the symbol of a car might not resonate with a toddler, because they might not know that symbol is the same as the object. So there are stages in cognitive development that children go through, and also they go through it unevenly, I would say. Some children are more advanced than others. Some children are more capable in general, and some children might have delays or additional needs and special rights, so neurodiversity as well. But in general, if we apply this developmental framework, children go through stages that are from simple to complex, and from sensory to concrete and abstract. Yes, so operational, according to Piaget. So neuroscience kind of supports these ideas, but also sometimes challenges them, because they say that sometimes children are able to think a little bit more advanced way than Piaget thought. Piaget is our theorist in early childhood, and he did his research in the last century, so not now. So it's work in progress, but they do know about babies thinking that it is still limited in a way that they're not able to think in an abstract way, but they're pretty smart in many other ways we didn't think of.
Interesting. So then when you overlay what you've tried and done with mind mapping onto that, I would guess, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, but part of the potential use of it is to start trying to help kids make that connection between sort of concrete stuff and symbols and
symbols,
and sort of help.
Absolutely.
And so your mind maps with children, are they very sort of picture heavy? Do you use a lot more pictures than words, or are you trying to sort of teach them language as well? So words are very important as well. What's kind of what does a mind map that you might have with kids look like?
I think it should be very simplified mind map with a picture in the middle, although you do write the words as well. So it's better to do both, because you are a teacher, you are role modeling, right? So, and you also show them that the same thing that you know is a concrete object like a phone, they would love that now. So can be also a picture of the phone, and can be a word like iPhone or phone, smartphone. So you can show them these three different ways of representations, right? And this really enhances their cognitive abilities. The key here is that children are not just visual learners like all of us, right? They also are multi-style learners. So what in my field is called 100 languages of the child. So this is the term coined by Loris Malaguzzi, who is Italian. He passed away, but he was a theorist and foundational father of Reggio Emilia project. So what he was saying that, and they proved it with their project, that children think not just with their thoughts, but they think through their body, through dancing, through interactions, and these are 100 languages. So it could be clay, it could be, and I think mind map also kind of taps into this visual, more sensory, because it could be 3D mind map, right? So it could be any kind of application of this theory of 100 languages. And they do need support, of course, with abstract concepts such as love, friendship, fair. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people say sharing is caring, right? So, but for child to understand what is fair, it's not easy, right? Because they think in concrete terms,
Mm.
and sometimes moral thinking is behind as well. So they're
Yeah.
still learning. They're going through stages.
Yeah, I was just thinking of I've just cleared out a load of books to make space, and one of the books that's on my list that I think I've buried in a pile behind me somewhere is a book by a lady. I think the name is Temple Grandin, who wrote a book called Visual Thinking, and she
Oh
is a very successful author and
yeah.
professional in her field, which is agricultural science. So she will go
Yeah.
to sort of a slaughterhouse and help them design it better to be more fair treatment for the
Yeah.
animals and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating book for lots of reasons. The reason you make me think of it is she was diagnosed with autism,
Oh yeah.
and she went through the whole school system with us, and she's been hugely successful. And what she talked about was, again, with those kind of languages almost, was when she was asked to do certain types of tasks, she would do
Yeah.
terribly, even though she was perfectly capable in terms of intellect. But it
Yeah.
was that her brain was just wired differently. And she said, when they gave me other sorts of tasks, I was
Yeah.
streaks ahead, miles ahead. And it almost reminds me of that kind of languages thing that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
if you can find the language that person
Yeah.
can best articulate themselves or best describe what they're thinking, that's
Yeah.
probably going to help them unlock. And she talks, interestingly for me, which is where her books really got my attention, is I've described we Biggerplate have described mind mapping for many years as
Yeah.
visual and spatial. So we've been
Yes.
saying that it's not just about that you can see the stuff, it's actually
Mm.
about you see where things are spatially
Yeah.
located to each
Yeah.
other. So where a topic is on the tree structure
Yeah.
tells you a lot more about it because of where
Yeah.
it is on the tree structure. So there's spatial things. So she talks about spatial as well being very important. And I guess all of that is sort of, if you can help kids kind of find a way that they can express their ideas, that's just one of the other tools in your toolkit as
Yeah.
an early childhood teacher.
Yep.
Mind mapping might not be for them, but if you know about it and you can
Yep.
give them that as an option, that's very interesting. So when you're doing, you were saying you were actually now teaching other people to become
Yep.
early childhood teachers. That's part of
Yes.
your sort of
Yep.
day-to-day work now. So in that kind of context, do you see a sort of a need for this technique to be part of the teacher's toolkit now? Is it
Absolutely.
something they know about? Is it something they don't know about? What's your sense of sort of
Yeah.
the modern early childhood teacher knowing about this stuff?
I think it's a great question. I have been in the classroom teaching other people, so facilitating teachers' education for more than 10 years as well. And I have seen other teachers teaching in an old style. And I'm a big fan of active learning, as you can imagine, just because of my background, my interest in learning in general, and how I learned as well. So I think we need to move when we learn. And we do need collaboration. So that's the second thing I value. And the third thing I buy for the new classroom is a good set of texts and poster paper. If I don't have a PowerPoint slides or the smart board, I
You'll
don't
have your
care
post-its.
about it. Yeah. I want post-it notes. I want texts, and I always have a set of texts in a big bag. And by the end of the year, they're all used, because we do a lot of posters, a lot of thinking that is done on paper. One group of students, and we call them diehards, they even made fun of me one day. When I got sick, they sent me a picture when I was here with flu that, Kate, we created a mind map for you. So they were trying.
So you're known as the mind map lady, are you?
Yeah, so they were like, here you go, this is my map to cheer you up. And that was funny, because we do talk a lot about, like, let's say infants, and I asked them to write down what comes to your mind when you think about an infant. You can use post-it notes as well, but both. But the key is to challenge conceptions, what we think about children, our image of the child. Could be done as a collage as well, but when they are working together on a mind map that is collaborative, they do come up with crazy ideas. So I have all this on my Facebook page, which is Storykate as well. Over the years, students would look into regulations and unpack them, because they're boring, regulations, but they will still unpack them with pictures, and everyone would draw something. The fun thing is that they would always pick up someone who can draw. But I said, I cannot draw, but I draw mind maps, because it's not about drawing. It's not for artists. It's for anyone. And once they will overcome this barrier, they will start brainstorming endless ideas. So personally, I think that would be a great tool to make part, not just for study skills, but for teaching as a professional competence, for all teachers in my area, early childhood, because I think I don't know, the types of mind maps you can create collaboratively as a team, the potential is huge and untapped. For example, we plan using old style plans. So even early childhood educators, we write down the purpose, the objective, teaching strategies, what I'm gonna do, and it's so boring to read. But if you think about any learning experience that you are planning, the most important thing is the purpose, right? So why are you doing this, and what are you doing, and how, which could be mind map, right? So first you write an experience in the middle. So for example, it could be, I don't know, painting, right? With Aboriginal painting. I'll use Australian analogy. And you want to introduce Aboriginal perspective to children. So you will set the purpose on one branch, then you will talk about how it links to inclusive framework and cultural responsiveness, and how you're going to collaborate with elders, etc. But then you also will think about what you're gonna do, right? So, and you can show some famous pictures of Aboriginal artists and communities. Then you can just show them smart board and different things, or you can show them dancing, stepping sticks, and all other things that would be interesting part of the lesson as well. But it's all gonna be on the mind map, and then you write how you're gonna do it, and then you link it to outcomes. So once I started doing that, I realized that this is a 3D plan. So you look at it as on one piece of paper and you know what you are doing, right? So instead of reading through your linear plans. So it's a non-linear plan that is really amazing, but I also see how it is extendable. So any learning plan that you create is emerging curriculum plan. So you can add and add and add parents' feedback, children's ideas, your ideas, children reflections. So you just use different colors, right? So, and that's something amazing.
It's interesting you say, because there's two things you say there in terms of a plan, and I could, if I didn't know you and I didn't know what field of work you're in, I could quite easily take the words you just described, and I could have been saying that to one of our business clients. The idea of creating a non-linear, expansive plan, that's what we need. We need to be less wedded to linear, thick plans that have no room to adapt. That's one of the things I think is always so interesting about mind mapping. And obviously Biggerplate, we're heavily biased really towards using software, but I think the adaptability of it. So again, that non-linear plan, if you go into your lesson with a mind map plan, and maybe a child gets very excited about something that you thought you were going to deal with later in the lesson, I think you're going to be more able to adapt. And okay, so let's follow that interest while it's here. Let's kind of strike while the iron's hot, and know you've still got this plan structure, but also the ability to kind of adapt. And I just think it's more easily done. It's like when I talk to people about making presentations, which is a lot like a lesson. Presentations that are really fixed in their linear route can be really thrown out if somebody asks a question after slide 2, right? So actually, if you've got something that just enables you to jump around and follow the interests, I suspect that's a lot more real life reality for a teacher as well. As it probably very rarely does it go nicely to plan in the lesson.
No, not at all. That's what I'm
something
saying.
A little bit more adaptable is probably quite important.
We call it inquiry. So I think if you approach it as inquiry as well, inquiry-based learning just asks for mind maps, right? So inquiry
sounds made for mind mapping.
So it starts with a question. For example, like I'll give you my inquiry. We were wondering about dinosaurs. So
I'm always thinking about
yeah,
dinosaurs, Kate. So
yeah,
we need to know these.
Yeah, you don't need to be a neuroscientist to guess
No.
that children like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are big, they're powerful, and they're unusual, and no one knows what color they were. So we started with this inquiry: what are dinosaurs, and where did they go? So any of these questions can be unpacked into a separate inquiry, but they had their own questions. So I can write like hundreds of questions, but it's not about me. So I only prepare the soil with this mind mapping, and that's why a plan wouldn't allow this flexibility. So I can only write what, why, when, what happened, color. Yes, so I can just write these bones of the inquiry, but children will guide me to ask proper questions that they have in their minds, not me, because it's not my inquiry. It's children's inquiry that is guided by a facilitator who is a teacher in early childhood. So then when you see what questions do they have, for example, they had a question: how did they have babies? Yeah, children are interested in that. So we researched how did they have babies, and then we discovered that they have eggs, right? So they were very surprised. So why? Like birds? Yes. And then we learned about eggs, and we created plaster eggs, and then we also did a lot of interesting other things. But they questions they had, they would be very, very unique and different. So in a group of 10 children, you would have 10 questions, right? So,
Right.
and some children don't know anything about dinosaurs. They're open to anything. While some are very particular and already have this as a hobby. So they've already been to museums. So they will tell you all the names of dinosaurs that you are unable to pronounce. And they will correct you. And then you will add this to your mind map. And what is interesting as well about the theory of Vygotsky, that you need to include peer teaching, right? So when children can learn from each other. So instead of you developing your lesson plan, you also with mind map allow this particular child who's an expert in dinosaurs teaching other children. You're in play. Yeah, so he will be scaffolding everyone, giving feedback. And look, it's not going to be factual or correct, I'll tell you that. So I have a lot of pictures where a child is saying, this is Stegosaurus, and I can see that it's not, but this is what I think. Right. So you can correct them, or you can ask more questions. So we approach it as an inquiry, and we can ask what Stegosaurus looked like. So, and then this will continue the inquiry and questioning.
And I guess with something like that as a question, so if somebody's drawn their Stegosaurus and it's clearly not right, I guess by the further inquiry, as a group, if you say, what does a Stegosaurus look like, you're probably helping that child to realize that their version of a Stegosaurus probably isn't correct, right? So then you're sort of guiding them towards that bit of learning as well.
Yeah, well, that's true. The other thing I remember was interesting, that it's really true about children's mind and theories. So if you that's my dinosaur, that's why I'm referring to Dinosaur Inquiry, one of my favorite ones. So there was a child who used the whiteboard, and I have small whiteboards in the classroom, and I encourage my students to have whiteboards and texts that are smaller. So these ones are a little bit hard for children to hold. So they're like more like those tiny texts for the whiteboard. And he had this wonderful text, and he did draw a dinosaur there. I don't know if you can see, but that's a child.
It's a bit blurry because of the background. Okay, I think the background blur is a bit blurry.
Here you go. Should be better now. No?
I think the blur effect on your camera is blurring the image when you put it up. Yeah.
Okay, how about
there you go. Yeah, perfect. That's much better. Yeah,
it's a black and white picture of a child holding a picture, right? Nice. So this also could be used for mind mapping these boards, but it's not the purpose of them. What I really liked about this picture is that he did create very detailed representation of what we've learned. And he said that dinosaurs lived with cavemen. So he thought that people and dinosaurs lived at the same time. So, and again, so he developed understanding of symbols as a powerful means of communication. That's what I see. I don't see the arrow here. I don't see the mistake of actual problem. So with under 5 years of age, we are more interested in the processes of thinking and learning. And I think now schools adapt it as well. ChatGPT can give you all the facts you want and Google as well. So, but thinking is something that you can only outsource in few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the impact of technology generally in the classroom. I'm fascinated by and very ill-informed about myself, but it would probably be a whole other conversation to get probably yourself and maybe some of the other educators we know to get onto a panel discussion about something like that. But I think it's we've had a lot of discussions, and certainly at Bigger Plate we've been asked a lot about things like ChatGPT and mind mapping and how they intersect, and whether it's mind mapping, teaching, business, anything. I think if you fundamentally boil it down to exactly as you say, it can do a lot of the heavy lifting. But if you actually want to do any thinking, you're going to be shortchanging yourself. And I guess that's one of the big challenges for the teachers, is to help children of all ages understand that if they just default to that, they're shortchanging themselves long term, dramatically. But as I say, maybe that's a different topic altogether. There was something I wanted to just touch into with you, Kate, on your example with dinosaurs, which is a really nice example, because I think everyone will kind of understand how that kind of could be mind mapped. And what I think I would probably be getting asked if we were doing this as a webinar with an audience, particularly an audience of maybe teachers or people who are trying to sort of teach maybe kids, even their own kids, is maybe some of the more practical tips. So, for example, when you talk about the dinosaur mind mapping as an example, in practical terms, is that you on a whiteboard like this? Are you the one drawing the mind map as they talk and shout out their ideas? Or are you trying to get them to write a mind map of their own, or are they maybe not quite capable of that skill set yet, depending on the age? What's kind of the practical, if I was a teacher saying I'm going to try and do mind mapping in my classroom of 5-year-olds tomorrow, what maybe are some of your like more practical hands-on teacher tips, if I can ask you that?
I think the easiest way to start is when teacher is documenting children's learning and children's words. So what we call it documentation or capturing observation. So make learning visible. But because we are using another observation type, which is called flow books, they look like the ones that I just showed you. They are really big pieces of paper, more than A3, like I would say A2, A1 size, and they can be put in the mode that we want. With those books, you can involve children in adding to the mind map. I don't think they're able to draw the mind map at the age of 4 or 5, but by the age of 6, with guidance from the more knowledgeable other, who is a teacher, parent, or facilitator, or the peer, they can. I wouldn't give them mind maps without proper training. If it's part of your inquiry learning, maybe, but no, I don't think so. Right. I don't think with younger children they can do mind map by themselves. So, but they can try with guidance first, so which we call scaffolding. So if you do it more often, I think it is possible. What you can do instead of words, though, invite children to draw. And more like sketching, right? So with sketches, the key idea is that you need to give them really good tools. As I was saying, children need the best tools, and that's another influence from Reggio Emilia, because they need to make marks, right? So they start with scribbles, and then they evolve into drawing, right? So all children evolve to drawing, and they actually giving the freedom to experiment, they all can become really good drawers of their ideas, like this boy. So this happened not because he is actually talented in drawing. He is just a typical 4 years old, but who's giving tools, right? And this was part of everyday classroom delivery. So they all did draw dinosaurs, just in a different way, but this was available. So making mind map tools available and showing them would definitely promote mind mapping as thinking. But I also would add stickers. So you know how you can have pictures from the magazines, that's the cheapest
Yep.
way, or you can get those stickers with different objects, because children do understand symbols by the age of 4 5, they are better at it, but even 2 years old can get symbols that are familiar. For example, they might know objects that are related to their life, a doll, iPhone now, mother, father, parents, whoever. So they might find those pictures quite relatable, and they can put them on mind map when they want. But
Interesting.
yeah, so I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, supporting them with stickers can help, and pictures, but encouraging drawing is better,
Yeah.
because they learn to hold the pencil, and of course it's school readiness as well. I used to teach children to read and write, and that was like early learning. I usually don't support early learning, but it was in community where learning was required, so people want to keep their mother language, so Russian. So I used to teach a lot of children to not forget Russian and learn to write, because
Right.
that's the hardest skill. They need to learn to read, and they need to learn to write. They can speak in an everyday way, right? So in everyday language, but they are not familiar with writing and reading unless you teach it. So that's the most important thing. And I did it in a playful way, but then I realized that drawing is one of the most powerful ways to explain anything to a child, but not when you draw, but when the child draw. So I asked my child, who was like, let's say 8 9, to draw any proverbs that we covered, or any verbs that we talked about, and this was making an impact on his memory and long-term memory. Sometimes he would ask, what is that? I don't understand this expression, because he's not a native speaker anymore, he's bilingual, so he wouldn't know the context of using this particular phrase. And when I will ask him to draw, you will see that he doesn't understand it the way it is. So I will explain that, no, that's
Yeah.
not the way you understand it, but that's a really creative way to think about it. Yeah. And
Yes.
I also found that if you read a text, that is linear.
Hmm.
And then I will ask him to draw what you just read. That would be like a comic book, right? So,
Yeah.
or few notes that are visual. Put it on the mind map, and it would become even better. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've always wondered, but again, it's not really my area of expertise or Bigger Plate's area really of expertise, is I always wondered, and again, it might be that you would say maybe it's a slightly later age group of
Yeah.
children, but I always wondered about the idea of, or what you talk about scaffolding, and I love scaffolding as a reference point for mind mapping.
Yeah.
I think it's such a relevant term
Mhm.
for thinking. It's kind of scaffolding for the brain, somebody described it, and I really like that. Across the board, that's whether it's business, education, or at home, it's a
Yeah.
great way of thinking about mind mapping. But the one that you made me think about was as a use case where maybe you do get children mind mapping, possibly a little bit later, is perhaps where you, the teacher, have provided that initial scaffolding. So perhaps
Yes.
you've created the first branch, and
Yeah.
you're asking then, and maybe you've even created some blank branches, and you're
Yeah.
asking them to write on a branch that you've already created, and then
Yeah.
build on it more. And so maybe sort of giving a little bit of a starting point for the mind map, because I certainly know the one time I tried to teach my godson probably 15
Mhm.
years ago how to do mind mapping, it was just chaos, and I realized how ill prepared I was to try and teach a child anything,
Yeah.
and B, I realized that the basics of structure were not
Yeah.
important to him at all, but
No.
actually it was the structure he kind of needed in order to make the use of mind mapping. So I've
Yeah.
always thought about this kind of a type of mind map for children and for learning, that should almost be filling in the blanks kind of tasks, but
Yeah, I agree.
with some structure provided by the,
Mhm.
what did you say earlier, the better informed other, I guess, or what was
More
that phrase?
knowledgeable other.
More
Yeah.
knowledgeable
So,
other, yeah.
which actually brings the other concept, guided participation. So by
Right.
Barbara Rogoff, also based on the ideas of more knowledgeable other. So Barbara Rogoff actually was a researcher in our field as well, and she said that children learn through observation a lot. Yeah, you can kind of relate to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't need to do something to learn about rituals or taboos or how we do things. Children know how we do things. For example, every 2 years old child knows what happens during dinner or celebration. Yes, so they know all the ins and outs because they were watching since they were babies. So babies learn through observations. And if you do mind maps, they would know that this is what you do, and they actually would be exposed to it. So same about teaching. So if you do it in your classroom, they would know it, because mind map is a snapshot of things. So I know my screen is a little bit blurred, but if you look at this one, so that's just a simple mind map. But if you are drawing something with children about what do we want to do today, right? So what kind of things do we want to play with? So they can see all the options, add pictures to that, and that would create a daily routine or a structure of the day. And if it's always displayed there, they read it with like holistically, because children are really, really wired to learn at this age. So they will learn it as a snapshot, right? Like this. And they will put it in their memory and they will remember. So it might help children with additional needs or who may need extra support to remember what was first, what was next. That's why people use a lot of color post-it notes as well, and different things that help them to organize their thinking. And sometimes there are intuitive ways like this. Like this.
We have a teacher in our Bigger Plate community called Alessio Bernardelli, and he shared some amazing mind maps many years ago on Bigger Plate. And one of the mind maps that you made me think of there, he created with his children, not his teaching children, but his actual children. He created a mind map around the bedtime routine.
Yeah.
So they created with his kid, I think it was, and they created a branch that was about sort of brushing teeth and these kind of things, and then that was on the bedroom door and the bathroom door to just sort of try and teach. And again, it was a very young age at that stage anyway. It was just a good example, I guess, of that sort of.
So that's a guided participation in learning mind maps, but also guiding participation. And it's a visual reminder for them. They need to remember multi-step instructions. It's not easy for children. That's what I'm saying, not abstract thinkers. So for most of us now, we start to recognize that attention and focus is not easy, especially now, right? So we are challenged even with established attention. People who finished school successful, who studied at university, now struggle to go through the day without scrolling. That's me. Or standing there like staring at the half an hour passed. I was like, what am I doing? So children have less control, of course. And if they're exposed to technology, you can imagine that's a bad combination. So, I think adding tools for mindfulness, and I think drawing, that is collaborative drawing, is a wonderful tool for mindfulness as well. So you can use it as an activity itself. So for example, at the beginning in some teaching, I've seen some teaching forums, they do a morning meeting or yarning circle, as they call it in Australia. It's, again, Aboriginal perspective influence. So people sit and have a chat, or yarn, as they call it. YARN. So having a yarn is more like a chat informal. How are you going? So what are we thinking today? What are we planning to do? And then you can, of course, document it as like, this is what we are thinking, and then display it for everyone, and then review it at the end of the day. So let's have a look at this mind map. What have we done today? You don't even need to name it mind map. You just need to tell them this is what we've done. This is what we plan. I imagine that if you give them their own notebooks as well, or journals, so you can call it flow books, notebooks, journals, but they are individual journals, 3 to 5. We are talking about more like 4 years old children, 5. And then their own journals where they will be also doing something. You don't know what they're going to draw in there, but they will pretend that they will draw the same thing as you do. And sometimes they will just draw a picture for mommy, yeah, something random, but they are doing the same process and they're involved in the same learning as you are, yeah, with them. So that's
Mm.
scaffolding. So I'd say, yeah, take it easy, lower your expectations for the product, but the process is still important and valuable.
Yeah.
Yet I need to add that in some approaches like Reggio Emilia approach, which I mentioned, I see children reaching amazing details in drawing, but I think it's because they have so-called atelierista, which is an art teacher, and also just the way that this project is structured to support children's thinking. So they are focusing on supporting the skills at the highest level you can imagine. So it does promote creativity, it does promote problem solving. And when I look at representational skills of children, for example, when they think about who is the boss, that's an abstract term, right? This inquiry usually is supported by drawing as well. So drawing, mind mapping, you see, they're kind of very on par when
Mm.
it comes to thinking and teaching
Yeah.
children to think.
And I guess you would be hoping that if you're teaching both mind mapping and drawing, they sort of inform and improve each other as they develop.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a lot of people now move away from pen and pencil, right? So, but
Mm.
children are still, although they're digital nomads and they're digital generation, they still benefit from physical sensory drawing. Yeah, so or
Yeah.
mark making. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So that
think.
was going to be my sort of final, I guess, just keeping an eye on the clock. I know you've got
Yeah,
other things you need to do today, but I could talk about this for ages because I just think it's fascinating and it's such an unknown world to me. It's just brilliant. But I guess if I was, you talk about there around the move away from pens and paper and
yeah,
the adults are glued to their phones. So
yeah,
what hope do the children have? So if you were sort of looking ahead into the future, it could be a year from now, 5 years from now,
mhm,
whatever, and you were saying that you think mind mapping is a very good technique for both children and teachers to sort of be
mhm,
aware of and have at their disposal. Now, obviously, Biggerplate's very focused on mind mapping software, but we also believe very strongly in the hand-drawn mind mapping and
yeah,
that benefit. As much as anything, I love to do it as a break from the screen
yeah.
and things like that. So if you were sort of looking and saying, how do we help and sort of what could we collectively be doing, Biggerplate and our community members like you and the partners we have in software world, what could we be doing to maybe help those teachers perhaps understand a little bit more about the tools and techniques and what, if anything, could be done to kind of enable that scaffolding for younger kids, even if they're not quite mind mapping in the Tony
Yeah,
Bazan way that people might imagine? How do we kind of get some of those early stage steps sort of in the
yeah.
right direction? Any sort of future thoughts you would have on how to keep growing?
Yeah, I don't have a clarity on that.
No, I was hoping you'd really have all the answers there, Kate.
But I imagine that it is. I think it's important to show teachers the benefits, yes, so of that. So that's responding to the pain points and the problems that we have as early childhood educators and teachers. I think in Australia and around the world is lack of time.
Right.
So showing the benefit of brainstorming your whole curriculum in 1 hour,
Mm.
which I did, for example, as a student. On one page, yeah, I brainstormed 2 weeks of learning for my focus group, and the teacher was very impressed. I used MindMeister back then, and I loved how you can use move the branches as well and add to it, and it evolved as well. So, and she loved it, and she actually was hooked on it as well, the program.
Right.
I think this is one benefit, is that you are speeding up the process of brainstorming. Instead of writing lists, yeah, you can just write mind map, which already will be organizing it in inquiries or play areas. So let's say you are not doing inquiry based learning, but you are doing play areas. You can link them to your outcomes or to your goals, so it immediately organizes it, right? So this way that you can see, right? So, and you can show it to parents and you can show it to your colleagues. I think the other benefit you can focus on for teachers and educators is collaboration. So working together, it means that you are not brainstorming by yourself. You are working as a team, and then you have more ideas. Simple as that. Brainstorming benefits from more people. So you can share it on Facebook page or whatever forum you are part of, and ask them to contribute using the same tool, MindMeister, right? So, and then everyone will contribute. And first it wouldn't be organized, then facilitator can kind of clear it out. But then you will have all these opinions or solutions on one page. And I think it's amazing. It's really underused in management of early childhood centers. For example, we are supposed to do quality improvement plan every year, which requires a lot of thinking, right? So, and contributions from families, from children. And mind maps would be great for that, right? So if you question something, ask families to contribute, give them mind map template, and ask them to say, what do you want to improve for children's health, right? So they will quickly add a lot of ideas for you, right? But if you just ask them, what do you want to improve for? So they would not have time for that. But if you have prompts like mind maps, right, so that would also give you more feedback. I think color in general can improve documentation and make learning visible. So that would be the next benefit I would promote. As I said, it's really beautiful way to share learning. Yes, so parents want pictures and videos because they're now addicted to pictures and videos. But I always push back and say that we are teachers to start with, and we collect documentation for ourselves, yeah, to plan and to improve children's learning. But even if you want to share it with families to make it more enjoyable and show them the progress or distance traveled, so how much child learned over this time when they are with us, right? So mind maps can show you that. Yeah, so I think it's also a great visible way to show the progress. Yeah,
It's kind of I wouldn't have thought of that as a use case for mind mapping, but I suppose to your point, they do end up being a little bit of a record of the thinking journey that's happened as well. So if a child is mind mapping their own ideas as well, you are getting a sense of how did they think about that topic 6 months ago versus how do they think about that topic 6 months later, and is it any better, is it worse, is it got different gaps, those kind of things.
Absolutely. It's documentation. It does show a visible it does show thinking that is visible and tangible as well. You also can see fine motor skills developing and just maturity as well. It's a snapshot. So I think drawing and samples are amazing. So why don't you do it on mind map as part of inquiry? For example, my students now, they are doing at university, they have to do inquiry-based portfolio based on nature topic, right? So, and they have to brainstorm with children, let's say something about butterflies. So, and they have to start this inquiry and they have to come up with 5 interesting questions. And a lot of them struggle until I show them mind map. Right. I think mind map is a powerful tool for that because they come up with a lot of great experiences once you show them how to write the question. And then obviously they look at it, this question is very similar to this question. I probably need to either put them together on one branch or it really helps you to kind of think about the project in a more complex way. So and see the gaps, as you said. Here we already covered that, but this one maybe it will go in this direction. We don't know with children, right? So the learning is very raw and unpredictable, but the teacher's role is to guide it, to achieve more depth, to show them maybe more connection with nature in our case, so or promote asking questions. And I think for teachers this would be a beneficial way to move away from linear way of planning, linear way of programming, and just seeing everything as templated. You know what I mean? So you can't buy everything on Twinkle. So Twinkle is a website where you can templates or lesson plans. It kind of saves you time, but it doesn't really help you to create program for this particular children, because those ones that planned for, they're not the same ones that
Yeah.
you have in your classroom. So I think it gives you a really fast way to plan for this particular group of children and meet their needs in a more effective way.
Yeah, and I think for children, I could understand wanting to keep them, well, not keep them, but sort of encourage them more towards pen and paper. I think for teachers, for that time saving,
Yeah.
And the ability to adapt, you might create a plan for one group and then say, okay, it's close but not quite perfect for
Not
this other
quite,
group,
yeah.
so I'm just going to adapt it. That's where I
Yeah.
think the benefits of the software tools are just so great. The ability, like you said earlier, to sort of have a living,
Yeah.
evolving document that becomes, that's really important. And I think that it is still fast, it is still quick to be thrown as ideas, and as you say, there's two things over here that are quite similar. Okay, now they're one thing, that's easily done with the software tools. So I can 100% see that for teachers, and I think we've got to try, and we Biggerplate have got to try and show more of those sort of use cases in action. Really, we need almost to see more
I think that
teachers
would
and
be
show what they're doing like that.
Yeah, I think that would be fabulous. Yeah, for early childhood cohort. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would also add last benefit that is concepts. That's related to early childhood education in particular. I guess school is pre-play. You probably know curriculum, right? So at school, most schools in England and in Australia, they have planned curriculum. So these are the strands that you need to use in your lesson planning. So you need to show this, and this when you are planning your lesson, right, for this group of children. Or this year we cover those strands. While with your early childhood education and care, the key problem is that we are play-based. So children play, and when you look at it as a person who, let's say, doesn't have children or is not an educator, what you see is like some weird dynamics. So children just walk around, they mess up everything. And you call
my perception would be there is no learning happening here.
Where is learning? And they also tip things out, but when you know what you are looking at, this all makes sense, right? So understanding concept is important for early childhood student who comes to the classroom and sees the same thing. What's happening here? I want some learning. Let's make them sit down, and write, or sit down and do something, right? So, but if you see what's happening really when they tip the things out, it's a very convoluted process towards abstract thinking. So you need to tip something out 100 times before you understand the laws of physics. Yes, so that gravity, this is volume, this is what happens. Also, connection, cause and effect. So I tip my bottle on the floor and mommy comes and pick it up. Yeah, I tip it again. Oh, you see, I proved my theory. She comes again, and then she yells at me for some reason. I don't know why, but fun. I'm gonna do it again. So they are real scientists, according to Alison Gopnik, who is PhD researcher of babies, and they do know actually a lot about adults. Yes, and they manipulate in a way through thinking. So they try to understand us, and that's why they use all this stuff to understand the world, and we are the world for babies, and that's why a lot of interesting things are happening with babies within first 3 years, and I think seeing this learning is important, a part of our job, right? So, and also showing this learning to other people. So what happened, and it's not about using big words, it's about showing the concepts, right? So, and I think the concepts could be easily put on mind maps. So, for example, I set up Play-Doh center, not so that children put Play-Doh on top of their head, as they often do, or try to eat it. They always do as well.
Because it's delicious, obviously.
Yeah, but I want them to use their senses to explore the properties. So that's physics, right? So to see how it stretches. So many things. But without understanding the concepts, teacher wouldn't be able to promote learning, right? So, and without understanding concepts, you wouldn't be able to justify why you have this box of scarves or books over here? Or why do you allow children to tip things on the ground? And what are these loose parts for, right? So a lot of interesting things can be done with mind maps. Yeah.
Well, it's as I said, I so enjoyed our conversation earlier in the year, and I just thought, wow, this person knows a hell of a lot about their area of expertise. So I feel for anyone watching today, they've probably just seen about 0.01% of everything that Kate knows. So
area, yes.
yeah, so it is fascinating. As I say,
Yeah.
really eye-opening for me as someone who doesn't know anything really about this area. So I would encourage anybody watching this video to go and have a look at Kate's website, which you can find at storykate.com. We'll put a link in the description and make sure people know where to go find you, because you'll find Kate's contact details there and sort of be able to maybe get a little bit more sense of what you're doing, including finding their way to your YouTube channel, which is where I found you originally, doing things about mind mapping. So highly recommend for anybody. And I really don't think you have to be an early childhood educator to get some valuable ideas out of the work you've done. I think it's amazing. Some of the things you've said and some of the things we've chatted about, I could be applying those principles to some of my facilitation with a room full of adults doing business strategy. You know, some of the principles are sort of quite eerily similar as, you know, under fives. So yeah, it's fascinating.
I found the time that my adult learners are not far from the children that I used to teach or teaching. I think everyone wants to be heard to start with. Everyone likes to experiment and explore, and we need to offer people hands-on learning, which is still valuable, because people ultimately are sensory learners as well. So we never lose that, right? So we think that we outgrown it because we are big thinkers, but we still learn through our senses, and this should be really brought back to mind mapping, to business, to everything. And with uprising of ChatGPT, I think we need to come back to basics and be more grounded as well, because we will have to. So what will you do when you will have basic income? I guess teachers still will be a valuable profession, because I can't imagine this area to be outsourced, but let's see.
You'd hope not, but I can't rule anything out, can you? But Kate, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think your energy and your knowledge around this stuff is just infectious and just fascinating. So I'm sure this won't be the last time you and I speak, and certainly not the last time we pick your brains and maybe try and get some tips on what we could be doing to help people go further with mind mapping in particular area of your field. So thank you all. Thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing. And as always, if there's anything we can do to support you in your endeavors with mind mapping, then you just need to let us know. But thank you, anyone, for watching. If you need any more details from Kate, do visit storykate.com. And of course, if you need any further details from Biggerplate, you know where to find us. So thanks for watching.